Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is album review time once again. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Gothic Rock duo Host. The band's new album, 9, will be released. That is 9 in Roman numerals, isn't it?
It's 9 in Roman.
Question myself for a second there. It'll be released on...
I seemed like you said it confidently as well, and if this wasn't in video, everyone would have been like, Dave really knows his Roman numerals. Instantly backtracked it with your puzzled, glazed, confused look of 9?
Yeah, I thought I got it wrong for a second. It'll be released on February 24th on Nuclear Blast Records. So, Host is made up of Nick Holmes and Greg McIntosh of UK gothic metal band Paradise Lost. This is their debut album. And originally, I think I mentioned to you, I thought this band were named after the Paradise Lost album, Host,
yes.
which came out like late 90s. Turns out that's not completely true. The origins of Host do not trace back to the 1999 album.
I love the fact that, is this in the PR statement?
Yeah.
Because I love the fact that the PR statement answered your misconception as if it was having a conversation with you, and it was like that. No, silly reviewer. Before you make a mistake and say something on a video on YouTube, let me just tell you straight away, you're wrong.
Completely wrong. Yeah, it's not named after the 1999 album, which bears the same name, but instead to the West Yorkshire music clubs of the mid to late 1980s. While Holmes and McIntosh were already certified heavy metal fanatics, and then metal thrashing mad, as Holmes equates, they were equally drawn to the new wave and goth music scenes. The pounding rhythms, sublime melodies even, an undercurrent of darkness drew them in, creating immediate earworms and a desire to delve further. McIntosh finally put his plans into motion during the pandemic for a venture, so you were correct about that, a venture that would merge his penchant for sound design with the moods and atmosphere of the 1980s dance, pop and goth. The project was originally a solo pursuit until he asked Holmes, his longtime Paradise Lost songwriting partner, to join. Host was selected as the name as a tip of the hat to the aforementioned album that found Paradise Lost in an unprecedented period of experimentation, so it was kind of half right, that eschewed their metal roots and also changed their fan base in ways like never before. We always stood by Host as an album, says McIntosh. This project is not totally connected to that album, but some of the ideas are extrapolated. We're taking the basic premise and trying it out now, and really it was something fun and interesting for us to do. We've been doing Paradise Lost for a long time and got an itch to try something different from where Paradise Lost is now. I could take Paradise Lost down this route again, who knows? It may happen if we live long enough, but I thought, why not now? I had the time to do it. Okay, so, not gonna lie, Duncan, you probably realise, but when I heard the first single from this, I thought, this is an album that Duncan will check out in a heartbeat.
You literally said
in a heartbeat.
Your sales pitch to me and the reviewer who couldn't be bothered showing up that picked Avatar. Your review pitch to us was synths. Like that dude from all the memes it does, aliens. It's literally how you like synths. As if like, and I was like, don't fucking try and play me, Dave. We are synths. Turns out you were right. Synths, a lot of synths, a lot of synths, a lot of 80s. But yeah, that's how you pitched it to me.
Yes. Whether you liked it or not, we shall find out.
Oh, we will find out.
But I thought, like the core components, I thought this should, on paper, appeal to Duncan. So, Duncan.
Oh, hello.
Was I correct in my assessment of this album and your feelings of this album?
Well, let me just start by saying I wasn't sure after the first track.
Oh, interesting.
So the first track hit me, and it has a little drop synths. They are peppered throughout, but it was mostly kind of guitar driven, kind of 80s gloom than anything else. And I was listening to it and I was like, and I like that.
I don't know about you, right?
Yep.
When the first track kicked in, right? And it's just like like an acoustic guitar, like solo acoustic guitar, isolated guitar. When that kicked in, I almost like, and this was subconscious, but I almost went, "Look at this photograph," because I shit you not, the rhythm that comes in, and the chord that is played, it sounds like Nickelback in Photograph. I shit you not, the first little bit.
It has a passing resemblance.
It really does. Chad, you are always on my mind, my man. Always on my mind.
It wasn't, and once again, you preface by saying synths. So I was ready. I was locked in. This is a duo. This is two guys bringing the synth, and it's there, but it's not there. It does have an 80s vibe to it.
Yeah.
Weirdly, it's the odd one out on the album. It really, really is. It kind of almost feels like a hangover from something else. Yeah. Like almost like a Paradise Lost thing that, you know, like a riff that someone had that was never used in a song. It's the odd one out. Yeah. Because from Tomorrow's Sky, which is track 2, onwards to the cover of I Ran at the end, this is like balls to the wall, unabashed Depeche Mode. Like, it's all the way through it, and Depeche Mode is all you get in this. Like, big swaths of it, like this doomy, gloomy 80s synthy, poppy, indie, new wave, gothy, rocky, industrial shit. Yeah. And it's fucking great. Like, there's no getting around it. Like, after track 1 finished, and track 1's fine for what it does, it's just it doesn't fit on the album. There's no other song that kind of links back to it. And like the themes and the kind of almost the instrumentation for the most part is never really revisited. And as a result, even vocally, it doesn't sound in keeping with the rest. Well, he's not changing his tone or anything, but even the kind of melodies and stuff are different. And it kind of stands out as a bit of a sore thumb to me, even though I do like it as a track. I just don't think it necessarily fits the rest of the album. But from the moment we jump into Tomorrow's Sky, I'm smiling. When Host are at their best is when they really, really lean into the kind of the Gothic sensibilities, and I feel like we're using that a lot in this recording. But the Gothic sensibilities of the 80s, which were a time of, it was like almost kind of, you could have the glitz and glamour and polish and beauty of a Duran Duran, and you could juxtapose it with the weird, dark, and kind of cerebral work of a Gary Newman, and those two could exist in the charts together, selling millions, but completely different fan bases, like split right down the middle. And Host kind of lean into that. The Depeche Mode stuff, weirdly, without going at a deep dive on Depeche Mode, I think a lot of people forget Depeche Mode started off as a very happy sounding band, and it was over time and through a lot of fucking drug use, that band really got dark. And if you were to listen to Depeche Mode's more recent stuff, they've kind of continued that evolution into like just really dark despair. And Host have that and have it in abundance. The tracks are very formulaic for the most part. They are kind of all sitting about the 4-minute mark, just over 4 minutes, and they follow the standard verse chorus interlude. Like they have that locked in so that they don't throw any curveballs. There's no proggy middle section. You know, there's no this is the synth jam. You don't get any of that. It kind of follows those things, and they're always grounded. What I love about it is, once again, linking back to that kind of 80s aesthetic, is the songs all seem to be grounded around a sound, like specifically a synth sound. That I love that. That's how I used to play synths as well. I would find a sound that I really liked and I would build layers around it. They kind of have that as well. The drums sound like they're a combination of kind of like drum machine and live drums though, so I don't know how true that actually is. But like when they want to do like a poof, 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 the hit with the 80s drums, they come in and it sounds really, really cool, and it works for them as well. I like the weaving in and out of kind of happy to sad on it. Like, so when you're listening to tracks like Divine Emotion, which is a more chipper track compared to something like A Troubled Mind, or a track which is like clearly much more kind of almost felt like a bit like kind of Pet Shop Boys-esque when Inquisition kicks in. It does have this kind of very like you know the track's called Inquisition, so you just wait for him to go Inquisition. You're like, yes, done the fucking name of the song. And like it follows those things, and it's very true to form. I was worried, if I'm honest. I don't mind Paradise Lost. I kind of enjoy them, but I would never say I was a super fan or even like a person that like is in that mood to sit and listen to like a whole album. I've never been that guy. I've always appreciated what they've done. Certainly, kind of pushing that proggier element out there. They're very, very, very good at that. That I was concerned that this might not be able to hold my full attention, and that turns out it was a bit of a silly position to take. It has enough variety, enough tone, and enough going for it that it will invite back repeated listens. It's recorded very, very well. The sounds themselves feel kind of authentic to the era, but they don't use any kind of filters or techniques to make it sound deliberately 80s. You know, it still sounds like a modern sounding release. It just harks to that era. The only criticism that I can have on Host is I don't think they're doing anything that I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about from the 80s. I'm talking about there are bands out there, and we've reviewed them in the last couple of years, that have kind of went down the synthy industrial sound and wanted to lean more into the kind of Depeche Mode kind of the stylings, and Host do that. So I don't think they're doing anything remarkable, but I do think as a side project that sounds like quite a bit different from the main band. I talk about it a lot. I hate side projects where it just sounds like the band. And you're like, why are you doing a solo project when it just sounds like what you did on that album? It frustrates me. You don't get that here. This is clearly an offshoot conceptual idea that they've went down, and they give it its full attention and respect. So it's not reinventing the wheel at all, but it's really good. It's really, really, really good. I think they do it surprisingly well in such a way that it doesn't feel like the first time these guys have put an album out.
Yeah.
It feels comfortable to the point that I'm like, they feel familiar with their sound. They know what they're doing. They're continuing it on. And all the songs have those little hooks or earworms, whether it's vocally or on the synths. And that's the last point. I think vocally it's great. Loved it. I think there's plenty of dynamics on it. Light and shade, we love mentioning that, but there is. I think there's moments where it feels very kind of chipper in a kind of 80s sort of way, and then other bits where I feel he's really reaching to darker places, which the music itself lends itself to. So yeah, it's really, 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 really well done. It's just not the most original thing I've ever heard. So you were right, though. I did enjoy it quite a bit. So you did call it. As painfully predictable as I am, and as a shill for the synth as I appear to be, they do a lot. They do a lot on this that made me think this is cool as fuck.
Yeah.
So
cool, nice one.
And you, David?
Well, for myself, I'm a big Paradise Lost fan.
I know this.
I had the pleasure of interviewing the band. This would be back on the old website. It was a gig I went to myself. I can't remember what happened to you, or if you were away somewhere. But I ended up interviewing them, and they were on tour with Tribulation at the time. I saw them at the garage, and they were fucking phenomenal live. And the interview was great. It was such a good laugh. It was just like one of those really kind of natural chats that you have. It wasn't even really talking about like the band, and we're talking about TV shows and all sorts of stuff, but it was really cool. So I've been following them for a while. I really enjoyed the stuff they've put out over the years. And then when I heard the single from this, I was like, oh right, okay, this could be interesting. It's not like style-wise, it's maybe not my usual go-to, but I think these guys are incredibly talented songwriters. So I was like, oh, I need to check this out for sure. And the level of songwriting that these guys bring to the table has transferred over perfectly, into this project. It's very well crafted. In particular, what I enjoyed about it is the way they've shaped a lot of the melodies on this album. It feels like, and you kind of touched on it, it feels like a lot of the tracks are sculpted around a particular melody.
Yeah.
Like that was like the first thing they started with, and then they built the track around that melody. More often than not, it's probably the chorus, but not always. There are tracks like Inquisition that, they don't have a huge focus on the chorus, but more on the journey and the kind of the mood of the track. I think they did a good job of giving each track, its own kind of flavour, because it is an album that's quite similar in tempo throughout. It doesn't really do anything super fast or up tempo, but that's quite normal for Paradise Lost as well. So whilst you've got that like continuous pace, each track has to give you something different, and these tracks do that. I think it's a great selection of tracks. I think they are quite nostalgic in their tone, very 80s, very melancholic in places, and quite reflective as well. But what I enjoyed about this is that kind of level of like bittersweet that they give you. Although it's dark and moody, there is a streak of something more kind of like pop orientated here, that gives you the kind of moments of light and almost an uplifting side to the tracks that I wasn't fully expecting. And I loved it. I loved that kind of both the light and shade of the tracks on the album. Tomorrow's Sky or A Troubled Mind, those kind of tracks that they have elements in the synth work or the vocals that kind of balance out that like more kind of melancholic side of the band, which I really liked. And even though the music is predominantly written by Greg McIntosh, who is the Paradise Lost guitarist, this isn't a guitar heavy album at all. Like,
no. Which is why that first track just you know what I mean? It's like kind of almost. I don't know if it sets up a false expectation or if actually it's very clever in that when you hear that it's the Paradise Lost guys, then you listen to that first track and you're like, oh right, and then the album's like, nope. It's weird. I don't know.
I quite liked the first track, but as you said, the guitars kind of take a back seat for the rest of the album. Really, he's really focused on the programming and the synths here, which I think it's a great way to separate this band from Paradise Lost. Stylistically, it's obviously very different, but by pulling back on the amount of guitars used, it definitely gives Host more of their own personality. That being said, I can still hear elements of Paradise Lost through this, even without the guitars. Yeah. His writing style, the dark tone, and even some of the way the tracks are arranged are quite Paradise Lost, but it's different enough to be its own thing as well. I really enjoyed the choice of synth sounds that he used throughout the album.
Really well done.
It is. It feels modern, but it feels retro at the same time. It's a weird kind of mix, but it's the retro side of it is not too much that it feels like a complete throwback. There's enough other elements incorporated in this that give it a refreshing appeal. The strings that they use, for example, I feel very grand. The atmospheric sounds add that kind of mood to the album. And I liked the way they mix the drums as well. They've got tracks where the drums sound more like a kind of live sound, whether they are sampled or not, I'm not sure. But then they've got tracks where it's just pure kind of electronic drums. And that's the same for the bass. There's a mix of electronic bass and a kind of live bass as well, which again gives you a different feel on each track. Nick Holmes as a vocalist, I adore. I think he's just got such a fucking awesome voice, and he delivers another top-notch performance vocally on this album. His tone and his range really suits this down to the ground. So I felt like the melodies that he picked are very well crafted and really accentuate a lot of the melodies on the musical side of the album. There are some real kind of earworms as well on this as well, which will kind of get stuck in your head. The closing track, which is
I want to leave this to the end because this is the cover song. This is to me, like, there's a lot of specifically. Right, how to word this? I get frustrated when bands like go for we're doing the 80s influenced style, and then they pick the 80s track to cover, and I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, if anything, I would be more interested to see a band do a retro sound and then pick a song not from that era. and then adapt it to that sound as opposed to doing that. That being said, a lot of the genesis of what I think ties the entire album in stylistically comes from this track. So it almost feels like if the opening track is kind of like a red herring to what the album's going to sound like, the closing track in a lot of respects kind of feels like the Rosetta Stone that ties the whole thing together stylistically all the way through. So it's a very, very, very good cover.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it fitted perfectly with the album. Flock of Seagulls obviously did the original of I Ran So Far Away. I liked the way they kind of played with the tempo in this. So they do a more kind of like half time kind of tempo on the track, which I really liked. And then I liked the kind of the mix of the kind of retro 80s sounds with the live drums was a cool choice. They pretty much stick to the original in terms of the melody, which I'm glad they did, because I hate when bands do a cover and then they change the melody so much that you're just like, what even is this? Is this what song is this?
You hear that Morton C. Bell?
Yes,
looking at you with your fucking
So I enjoyed it, and I thought same with yourself. I thought it tied in perfectly with the rest of the album. This is slightly shorter than the original, but I enjoyed it. It's got a great chorus.
The original's a bit long though, so
it probably is. It feels quite anthemic for like a closing track on the album. So I really enjoyed the way it closed as well. I thought this was a really enjoyable listen. I think it works really well as an album to listen to in between heavier albums. Because I did feel like when I was listening to this, it kind of put me in the mood to go and listen to Old Paradise Lost or even like Old Catatonia or something like that. It was a good kind of like chill out album for me. Kind of like, the end of the day was like when I found it best placed to spin it. And when you're kind of winding down for the day, I thought it worked really well. But an enjoyable album that I'll probably come back to as a kind of breather in between kind of heavier stuff that I'm listening to. So, what did you score 9 by Host?
I gave it a 4. I really, really like this. Like I say, there's a lot of it that feels very familiar. But as a group of musicians trying something off-piste from what they usually do and picking a style which is not like immediately associated with what they do, to pay the bills in their main act. I think they handle this surprisingly well, like to the point that it feels like their heart is in the right place to do it. Like I say, that cover song at the end ties everything together, makes me understand it. The opening track, whilst I like it, I don't think it necessarily helps the album, so it marks it down a little bit. But apart from that, I mean, it's well written, well constructed, memorable, and authentic. So I think they get a whole lot more right here than they do necessarily wrong. And for a first release, that's admirable. So 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'd agree. 4 was my score as well. I think this is well written. It's well recorded. It's not nostalgic, but it's also got a freshness to it as well. And it's different enough to Paradise Lost to warrant doing this project. Because like the last thing you want is 2 bands that sound just very similar to each other. I
don't get it. Bands still do it as well, and it frustrates me. So
but I think there are small nuggets throughout this album that Paradise Lost fans will be like, right, okay, that's a little bit, that sounds familiar, and it'll pull them in to check this out as well. So I enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 from me. The album drops on February 24th on Nuclear Blast. Check out all the links to the band and the pre-order and all that sort of stuff. Let us know what you think. Stick some comments in, let us know. That is a review of 9 by Host.
Who am I to break free from my